Mine never was.
Good evening. Welcome to the February 24th, 2022 meeting of the Goffstown Planning Board. As usual, we start with introductions, and I'll start with David.
David Pierce, the alternate member.
Barbara Griffin.
Karen Hughes.
Tim Redmond.
Gayla Breck, alternate and recording secretary.
Hollis Adams, Select Board Representative.
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
We have several members that are not in attendance tonight, so David and Gail will both be voting unless we exceed the number of elected members.
Kimberly called in and said she would not be here. She had to take a trip. And Jim is running late.
What about Phil?
Phil, I have not heard from.
And so we'll just see if Phil and Jim both get here, then we'll have alternate voting for the two alternate members. All right, Joanne, the first order of business is minutes from the 13th, and I have a sticky note on my minutes. Could you please explain to the board what's going on with the minutes from January 13th?
Yes, Kimberly had a correction, and although she's not here, I do have an email. She said there are spaces after, on pages 2 and 3, there are spaces after Jeremy's name that were left to add his last name. Those didn't get addressed.
Where are we on the page?
Page 2 of 3. We're about 4 or 5 paragraphs down on page 2. It's Jeremy of Eversource. I'd have to get you that name. I don't know it off the top of my head.
What
Gail.
document
Are we
are you
looking at the
looking
13th or the 20?
27th.
We're talking about
He
the
was talking
13th.
about the 13th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have anything for the 13th.
I
Why
have
do
a-
we have
The
I have a
do we
reason
sticky
you
note.
this
have
just-
them here is because
the bond?
under action items, 3 paragraphs down, it talks about how the, Eric explained about the escrow, and they had requested to accept cash surety, and the amount was supposed to be determined, and then
It was determined at the meeting.
it was determined at the meeting, and the board accepted the cash surety, and now they would like to do a bond rather than the cash.
So Eric, could you come up to the table, please?
And that would be in the amount of $123,836.
Identify yourself for the record, Eric.
Eric Gustafson, Public Works Engineer.
So the Severino is requesting this bond, correct?
Correct.
And did you discuss cash or bond with them?
I was working directly with the site foreman, and I think the different terminology might have flip-flopped a couple times. I don't know what the final answer was, but they are saying now it was a surety, or a bond, not a cash.
Well, you can have a cash bond or
Oh,
sure, you can have
okay.
either one.
Yeah,
So they did not agree to a cash bond,
I don't believe so.
even though it was presented as such?
Cash bond or cash surety? In the minutes it says cash surety.
Cash surety.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the final
I think,
determination they sent to us was in the letter.
Collis also brought up a point, I believe, Collis brought up a point, did we include escalation clauses for different line items in that?
Yeah, a 10%.
And we did not have that in, did we?
No, we did not.
Okay. So what's the board preference? Do we want to leave it as cash bond as approved, or we want to leave it as let them change it to an insurance bond? Board discussion.
I think the focus was, at that time, was more on what the amount was and the escalating 10% versus whether it was a bond or cash. And so the board accepted it as cash. And now when we went back to them and said, okay, now you need to submit the money, they said, well, they'd like to do a bond.
Fine, I've asked the board for discussion on it.
It's complicated.
Jim, we're talking about the
There it is.
Sports Dome has requested a cash bond, cash amount be removed and replaced for a bond amount. So this is what the discussion is. I've asked the board for comment. And who wanted to start? Barbara, did you want to start? Or no?
I don't have any issues
Oh, I thought,
with it.
because Carlos looked over at you.
I
thought-
did have my
I-
hand up, but
I was gonna look
Jim
to her
wants
for a
to-
legal opinion, but
Yeah,
maybe Jim wants.
So-
if Jim wants to render it, that's fine.
If, I'd like to interrupt for 1 minute. David and Gail, the sitting members are here. So we have one missing, so David, will you start by voting in place of Kimberly? So, I'm going to leave it open to discussion. I stated earlier, Jim, that it seems to me that there have been discussions in the past about bonds that lapse and no one pays attention to them, and then they sort of vaporize and we have nothing.
The greater risk is a letter of credit that lapses than a bond. And we cured that by making them self-calling. I don't know if the bonds that we're getting have an expiration. They do.
Well, they're ongoing, they have no
Okay,
expiration.
so if they have no ongoing, it doesn't have the lapse issue that used to plague towns that did not calendar their expiration dates. And again, we've hopefully addressed that in letters of credit through the self-calling feature, but bonds, if they don't lapse, they stay in effect.
And our regulations do allow either one of those,
Yeah,
or
well,
a savings
We
account.
can't require just a
Right.
cash, we have to give them the option
So we cannot require a cash only, we have to give them the option.
under the statute, that's correct.
Carlos?
Well, he answered my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll just call for a hand vote on this matter. All the board members that feel it's acceptable to switch this from a cash to a bond, just raise your hand. Anybody in the negative vote? Seeing none. Joanne, we can approve the request to have it be a bond instead of cash.
But Tim, I'll leave it to you whether you want to count my vote because I came in late.
No, your vote's fine. So was a unanimous vote. And Joanne, who reviews the paperwork to make sure?
That's her. Here, I have more here. Excuse me?
Eric, are you going to review the paperwork to make sure that this bond is a self-calling bond, that it is not something that lapses in one calendar year or something to that effect?
It comes to DPW, and we also send it to the finance department, so between two of us, we'll check it.
As long as it comes in correctly.
Yep.
It's not accepted until, well, we already have because they've got their CO, so we're done. That's comical. They wanted their CO, which I'm sure they've got now already.
I have everything.
And we're in the middle of nothing.
I believe they have a 30-day CO right now.
Okay. All right. I'm going to wait for these two to get done over here, or move the meeting along. Thank you, Eric. All good?
Yes.
Okay, so we already accepted these minutes, so we don't have to accept them again, do we?
No, you
Do
don't.
we have to accept a change to the minutes, Jim or Barbara?
No, that's a reflection of what happened at the meeting.
It says here in the minutes, we accept a cash surety.
That's what
But
you
that's what
did.
you did. So these minutes will show that there's been an amendment.
Oh, so the new minutes will show this in the
Yeah,
minute.
I requested change, and so, okay.
Now we have a,
Do you want to go back to the January 27th minutes?
yeah, let's go back to that one now.
Okay, so Kimberly would like Jeremy's last name to be added.
Joanne?
It's Benel.
Benel, I
Benel.
found
Yeah,
it.
because it's further
Yeah.
on.
I just confirmed it.
Yeah, thank
for
you.
Eversource.
There's two places, one is on page 1 and the other is on page 2 towards,
No, there's one on
But they're
page
also
three.
on page 4 and 5, his name is in there as well.
I think those have his last name.
Yep, first and last.
Yeah, it was
There's
just the
some that don't
first
have
2
his last name.
pages.
Okay.
So we'll fix that.
So that correction has been duly noted. Anybody else have any other changes or corrections to the minutes from the 27th?
I move we approve them.
Motion by Jim to approve with changes. Second by anybody?
Second.
Second by Carlos Adams. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstaining.
Abstain.
2 abstentions. So we've already dealt with the request for the surety. So Joanne, we're on to review of fire cistern ordinance. Could you please bring the board up to speed to where we are?
Okay, so the fire department, do you guys want to come up to the table?
Yeah, it's the both fellows, whoever's going to speak for the fire department.
Murray, I'm sorry, is that? Murray is here tonight. He's the acting fire chief. Bill Connor,
Good
you
evening.
probably all know, is the fire prevention officer.
Hello.
And I'm Deputy Fran Enos, I serve as your Deputy Fire Chief.
So they're here tonight because they submitted a fire ordinance, basically having to do with, mainly having to do with cisterns, and lots of information. It's a 5-page document that you all received in your packet. And so we did hand this out at the last meeting. You had a chance to quickly look at it, and you had some questions, which I did send over to the fire chief so that he could be prepared for tonight's meeting. He did submit a letter that you also have in your packet, dated February 22nd, addressing the concerns that were brought up at the last meeting. I've also included a sample of what other towns are doing for cistern regulations, and then the last piece of paper that should have been placed before you tonight is our current cistern standards, which more so have to do with the requirements, the technical requirements of what the cisterns need to be built of, size-wise, all of that. So they're here to go over this document with you, and they would like you to include this document in the development regulations. I did talk to Bill recently about how the development regulations are currently being revised. So that would be a good time to include this information if you're all in favor of it. And tonight they're here just to explain why they want this and what their needs are.
Board members,
Before we proceed, could I ask Joanne a question of her sample?
go right ahead.
When you contacted the other communities about this issue, do they have regulations, or is this how they handle it?
This is, I didn't talk to anyone. This is from their regulations. All of these towns, I just cut and pasted from their regs.
Okay, so these are actually from regulations?
Correct.
Okay.
So my question for you, Joanne, is the acceptance or denial of this request, is this a planning board function, or is this a function that ultimately goes to the select board for?
No, because this has to do with subdivision, mainly subdivision regulations and development regulations. This would be included within your development regulations book. And so they're here to ask you to, take a look at this, let them explain why they want to do this, and then include it in the regulations.
Okay. Any other board members have questions for staff? Okay, guys, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask the board's indulgence too. I just come up on 30 days. However, I am familiar with planning regs and cisterns, and I've been working with Lieutenant Connor and Deputy Enos. And really, Mr. Chairman, our goal is to just bring some consistency to our cistern type standards, so that, with all the development going on in the town, we just thought it was time to try and get something memorialized that's going to be consistent, and that we, as the fire department and the planning board, obviously want to work together to make sure, we're doing the best that we can for the taxpayers. So that's really the purpose of all of this, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Connor, and he'll bring you through the development of this document.
Basically, we started with taking a survey of other communities to see what they asked for, and we did start to find that there were some consistencies and inconsistencies. A lot of how the cisterns are built are very consistent from community to community. How they're spaced and where they're located varies, and further research told us that the reason it moves around so much is it's based on the fire apparatus of a particular community. As for instance, if you were to look at New Boston's ordinance, They have a significantly larger spacing, but they still have a hose reel truck. So they can lay out more hose than an average community can, so their spacing is further apart. If you go to a community like Bedford, they don't carry that kind of hose. Their stuff is a little closer together. Our spacing requirements and what we're looking for is based on the equipment that we have. So just to give you a sense of how we're placing them and why we're looking for them in certain places. We typically are asking for a cistern to be located in areas where we don't have water, particularly the eastern part of town where basically the water mains just don't go. When we go to fight a house fire or any other brush fire or anything like that, we're limited to what we can carry on our vehicles. So when we get to a particular area of town, we're relying on things like cisterns to provide us with water supplies in those areas so that we can address our fire needs out there. So the opportunity comes here is when someone subdivides a lot, they're increasing the fire load in the area by bringing in new homes, and it's creating a higher demand on our equipment, so we're looking for a water supply to be available to us when we get there. What else? The size of a cistern is based on the insurance services office regulations. That's why they're 30,000 gallons, if that was a question for anybody. We used to ask for 15,000 gallons, and ISO several years ago upped the minimum size for acceptable cistern for credit to 30,000, and we in turn did shift our size to 30,000. And that was actually, I want to say, probably 2010, 11, that shift took place from 15 to 30,000. Most of the cistern proposal you have in front of you is for the people that are actually installing it. It tells them where they're going, how they're being built, how we expect to test them, how we expect them to fill them, the basic standards of construction. And we've had a lot of good luck with this. The cisterns that we're seeing over the past almost 20 years now have only been two brands. One of them is made by Mitchie Concrete out of Henniker, and the other one is a Xeris fiberglass tank. And they're, I think Xeris is out of Illinois. But typically we're seeing the Mitchie Concrete ones. Those are a 4-tank system, interconnected, over 30,000 gallons of water. They've been very successful since we started putting them in. Prior to that, we had what I would dare to call homemade. They were usually made out of septic tanks that were sealed and kind of piped together. We actually had a pool manufacturer who did a gunite version. We've had issues with both versions of those tanks. One actually, probably about 10 years ago out on Magnolia, had a spray-on finish that actually came off because it was a combination of a septic tank and a pool manufacturer had got together to build the tank. So we had to put firefighters in the tank to scrape that whole lining off so that it wouldn't ruin our fire pumps when we actually drafted water out of the tank. So when we got to be able to shift to the Mitchie's uses the right concrete that holds water. They last for years and years, and they are designed to be fire cisterns. They're not designed to be septic tanks or pools or whatever the case may be.
So, just so everyone understands this a little bit, these in the document that we've proposed, the cistern locations, vehicle pads, cistern specifications, that all actually comes directly out of the Nfpa life safety code, and then it dives down into the exactly into the Nfpa code that refers to water supplies, NFPA 1142. In I don't know what year it was, the last cycle. Every few years in the legislature, the state fire marshal presents the proposed changes to update the New Hampshire Fire Code. And then the legislature votes on that, they adopt an RSA, and that's what we all follow. So the last version, the NFPA 2015, that's what was adopted, and we follow Life Safety Code number 1. That's NFPA Code number 1, which is the Life Safety Code. So these things that Lieutenant Connor talked about, that's where the manufacturers now, whether you go to here, Ware, Concord, Londonderry, Derry, wherever, to build this, it's boilerplate stuff. We just take it and put it in. Each town has a little flexibility because the fire code, which is the law, specifically defines the authority having jurisdiction has some flexibility. And the authority having jurisdiction is the fire chief. And Chief Murray, because of his extensive history, has a lot of knowledge with other communities as well, so he could speak on the fact that this isn't like just so specific. As Lieutenant Connor defined the distance, it does come down to our apparatus. The amount of water, that's been upped by communities because of the amount of construction we've just seen. It really is it's pretty amazing. And then the triggering mechanism, the question of when do you put it in? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 1? I believe you saw Derry actually does it by, not by the number of how it's being divided by lots, but they do it by how you're going to do it by number of units that would be on there. That is left to the authority having jurisdiction under the law. So when Lieutenant Connor was working this and I was assisting him, we wanted to be as amendable as we could to the residents and contractors, and also provide protection, because the way the code point blank would say is, if you're going to put in a subdivision and there's no water, you have to put in a cistern. It'd be for one house. So in Bedford, their triggering mechanism is 2, and that's it. We looked at, I can't tell you how many different across the state of New Hampshire, and 3 seemed to be the 95% of it was that was the one. 3 seemed very acceptable. We also have in it, because the law allows the authority having jurisdiction, which is the chief, has the ability to say, if you don't want to do the cistern, you could put in sprinklers. Home sprinklers currently in the state of New Hampshire are not required by law. If the law changed, that would obviously affect certain things, but right now it doesn't. But what is allowed is the option. And so the sprinkler, they could opt, if it's cheaper, to say, we'd rather sprinkle these houses up front. That's perfectly fine. When you purchase a home that has a sprinkler system and you get it, it is on your onus as the owner to maintain that sprinkler system. We as the fire department don't go in once you purchase it. Whereas in a commercial building, Lieutenant Connor checks on those, inspects them as requirements. With a cistern, once the town adopts it, it comes on us. So we go out, check them, test them, refill them. You guys pointed out at your last meeting, you caught, I don't want to say a mistake, but we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. Some of the language we took, one sentence we did take was from another community. I don't know which one of you pointed it out, but you all caught it, was we put in all cisterns shall be trouble-free and carry a lifetime warranty of 50 years. So we took that from another community. They still have that. After rereading it, it was like, yes, that's kind of silly. What we did talk about was, because it does come to the town of Goffstown, and many of the manufacturers now have a warranty in it, we would propose the language to be, strike the lifetime warranty and say, any warranty from the cistern manufacturer shall be able to be transferred to the town of Goffstown upon acceptance of the subdivision project. So if there is a warranty, once it comes to us, that if there, anything would be with the town. So that way, you know, there are some products that you buy, and if you sell your home, you know, that it breaks. You know, we'll say, we'll do this. Lieutenant Connor, as we've seen now, there's only a couple people out there who manufacture cisterns. So it's consistent. They don't try and play games. And if they don't, if Lieutenant Connor doesn't know them, it's probably not going to fly past the permitting process. You guys also pointed out the and/or. Again, that was literally just language where we didn't know any better. We use it, so we struck the and all we were trying to do there was to make sure that we were defining who it might be, because there will be some people that will come for projects that would be a contractor, some that will call themselves a developer, and then there could be a homeowner or just an individual. We wanted to make sure we were encompassing all of that, and that was specifically on me, because I was cutting and pasting some stuff, giving it to Lieutenant Connor. In your questions that you had back to us, there was one other one I believed in. It was, where did the authority come from for having a cistern? So the fire chief, or in some communities it's fire wards that still exist. The fire chief has the responsibility to enforce the fire code. If you don't have a fire chief, the state fire marshal would come in. We follow the Nfpa code, the New Hampshire code, which again was adopted, RSA 153, which is, number one is the New Hampshire Fire Code or State Fire Code. And how that came about was, again, we adopted that in its entirety. The state legislature did when it was presented. So that means when we get the book from the NFPA, you actually, is that the one? They adopted this whole book at the state as written. So that's the fire code, just part of it. This is one section. It's in its entirety, and everybody does that. Where the exception lies, and it says it right in there, is the little authority having jurisdiction. That is referenced specifically right out of that. So that's how we get there. And these are adopted and changed again. So if there is a code change, and Chief Murray, he's probably been through multiple code cycles, because every few years this comes up at the legislature, it comes back down, and then we stay on top of it.
Fran, if I may
Absolutely,
too, let me
please.
mention two of the other state RSAs. There's 154.18. It's called Establishment by Fire Wards or Fire Chiefs, and it basically says the fire chief may establish such regulations respecting the kindling, guarding, safekeeping, prevention, and extinguishment of fires, and then it goes on from there. And there's also 154.6, which is duties as to fire apparatus and water supply, and it talks about the fire chief shall keep or cause to be kept in order all apparatus provided by the town for the extinguishment of fires and mitigation of other emergencies, and shall cause all cisterns and sources of water prepared for the fire department to be fully supplied and kept in order with available funds. So that's the statutory, one of the statutory pieces.
As just as a little historical side note, because Bill reads the code books back and forth. It's not my cup of tea. Ironically, in NFPA 1, and then when it gets into NFPA 1442 about cisterns, there's a reference to the town of New Boston, New Hampshire, that the country follows. Because when this was developed, New Boston actually sat on this and was used as an example, and that was part of it. So it really touches home to us, and the code is very well aware of what goes on in New Hampshire. So this is across, all the communities have to follow this to some point. It's when in the code it mentions authority having jurisdiction, could we have some influence? That's the distance between, as Bill had stated. This was to kind of clean up, because if you go to other communities' websites and stuff, it's right there. So when a contractor says, hey, I think I want to build in Goffstown, what's the cistern regulation? They can just go to the website, and it's either on the town's website or the fire department's website. Oh, there's the regulation, print it off. And when they bring their plans into you, they're already ready for you. They know what the expectation is. They shouldn't be coming before you saying, geez, I don't know. We want to make it as customer friendly as we can and have the information ahead of time. We were informed that you guys were going to make some changes, and we thought this would be the perfect time, because you guys are seeing this through the process, and Lieutenant Connor works behind the scenes with all the other people involved in this ahead of time. Put this right in there at the same time. The fire chief is responsible at the end of the day for fire protection in the town, so he has to do something. And again, Chief Murray is here now, but he might have identified it when he came in before, and so we have to get this up to par, because we're doing a little of this and a little of that, and let's just have a document and make it clean and make it so everybody were on the same page.
And Fran, if I can.
Please.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the boards, we don't go out looking for cisterns, because as you know, once they're built, we maintain them. And it's not much to maintain them in the first few years, but it can be costly. And so we're very cautious when we're considering whether we're going to use a cistern or not. I mean, really, some of the other reasons are, what are the first things when your insurance company calls for you to insure your house, okay? Where's the closest fire station? How much water are you bringing on your fire trucks? And where's the closest hydrant or water source? So when you have a 30,000 gallon cistern, that plays into the underwriters and when they're writing up your policy and deciding what you're going to pay for it too.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, John.
Can I just verify for sure that you would like Appendix B cistern standards replaced entirely with this new document? Which is the current?
If that would be, I just did this, and I typed it up. We obviously have it on computer to send you over. I typed it up just so we could have it. I tried to make some changes. I also, that was the other one someone caught, under requirements, section 2A, it seemed too wordy. I had actually just cut that right from the NFPA document, but I changed it to any subdivision that results in 3 or more new building lots shall require a cistern if any one of the following occur. So it would be clearer to the person reading that. If everybody is on board with this, the changes that we clarified from your feedback, then Chief Murray will obviously give it its blessing, because he's my boss and he's the guy. Then he would send it over to you, Joanne, and then we would adopt it as such.
And as a replacement entirely? Okay, I
Yeah,
just
so
want to make sure.
it would be those 3 changes that you guys identified to us, to just kind of correct that. And again, this isn't, it's not anything new. We just saw this as a good opportunity to collaborate because you are already making some changes to some other stuff. It falls, the cisterns fall under us, and we just wanted to try and, we want to make it better for the builder, so they know. There's a lot of contractors that come in, why is your rule different than this? If we put it out there ahead of time, they'll be prepared when they see you. Right now, we're kind of lucky because we have Chief Murray, who's got a wealth of experience in multiple other communities. So if something jumped out at him and saw this as crazy, it's good it didn't, but we would have picked that up right away. So this is blessing and a curse, but it's working out, and hopefully we can get this going in the right direction.
Phil?
Thank you. Chief Murray, you brought up the point, or that we accept it at some point in time. I don't recall on the list of things on a subdivision with the, like the surety bond, the bonding that we were just discussing, I don't recall that being an item on a subdivision to be checked off to make sure that it's there. This becomes a piece of infrastructure, like a road. We accept a subdivision, we accept the road, we get a deed for that. This is something that's a requirement for the subdivision that's built. At what process, what point, or how is the transfer? Because you mentioned that it's used, and at some point in time, it needs to be maintained. You know, a road is specific. There's a deed, there's something there, there's a transfer. This being infrastructure, something that the town owns, what is there a process for that? Is that something that we should incorporate? I mean, who does the inspections to make sure that it's built the way it's supposed to be built? You know, when a road is built, we have standards for the road, Public Works, or somebody will inspect that to make sure that it's done, and that's part of the bonding for the process, so everybody, it guarantees all the homeowners and the community and the taxpayers.
That's in section 8 in your document. There's a whole inspection section.
Right, I understand about the inspection, but I
You
meant...
just asked who was doing the inspections, I'm saying.
Well, no, I understand, it's just that it's new, and I just wanted to bring it up so that we're all on,
So you're
the whole
talking,
process, I
you're
guess.
talking in the overall approval process?
The whole process
So
is
that when this board grants a project, that would be in there? Is that what you're saying, or?
What I mean is, we do an approval. We approve a project, they go to get their permits and everything. They have to put bonding, if there's a road involved. There's all rules and regulations that have to be followed, and finally the town accepts the subdivision. When the town accepts the subdivision, if there's a cistern in there, I'm assuming because it's a piece of infrastructure, is there a deed for it? Is there something for the transfer to the community?
Well,
Yeah, I believe there is.
it's on a piece of land that's deeded to the town of Goffstown as part of the right.
Well, this is what I just wanted to get at, so
That's the
we're
answer.
all on
I
the same
assume that's the
page.
answer.
Yes.
Because there's been a discussion when we've had these in the past of what the process was.
Right.
And, you know, I brought up, well, it becomes the town, but we don't have, you know, a road, it's clear for us. There's a transfer.
The location of the cistern is usually off to the side of the road, there's a pull-off, but it's on someone else's property, it's on the property owners where the house is.
But it's
No, it
covered by an
isn't.
easement.
No,
There's
I
an
did-
easement.
Well, that's
Yeah.
a question I have, because this isn't,
no.
But there's an
There's an
easement
easement.
on the
Right.
property
Right.
that's provided for the
right, but
town
it's
to
an
have
on
that
property
on.
owned by,
It's
Well, that's-
owned by someone else, the town
Right.
has an easement to have the
Right.
cistern there.
Well,
I
then-
believe when the road is accepted,
Somewhere.
the cistern is also accepted, and all of that acceptance
what
is
So based on this discussion, I
done by
think,
the Board of Selectmen.
based on this discussion, I think we need to amend our regulations to state clearly that the cistern is to be located on a parcel as part of the plat for the road plat, which includes a bump out, a monumented bump out, so that, so that they have to develop the lot to its proper size. And the cistern, we could amend that to say the cistern area could be counted as frontage,
We have that in our regs.
but
now.
not have it on an easement area on private property. It should be located on town property for insurance purposes, for a lot of
That's
reasons.
not how it is now.
Well, that should, we need to change it.
Well, no, that's not true, Tim, because we have drainage easements on people's property. We have all sorts of infrastructure that by easement, so we just do.
I disagree.
And in a lot of towns, they don't even own the road, it's all
I
easement,
disagree.
so.
But that's just an opinion.
Does
Barbara,
it-
you had your hand up?
I do.
Please.
I was not here last meeting for the discussion, and I'm sort of looking at it, trying to, let me, if I could ask the chief or Lieutenant, when was the last cistern built as part of a development?
Montalona?
December?
Months ago.
Okay, all right. And what development was that in conjunction with?
That's the Montalona, near the Dunbarton line.
Right, so let me rephrase the question. When was that plan, when was the Montalona development approved?
Last year.
Last
Okay,
year.
all right, that's that subdivision, all right. So what problem are we trying to solve with this? That's what I'd like to know, is what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because it seems to me, we have and I understand why things were done the way they were, we have duplicated a lot of standards that are in that book. And so if I adopt this as a standard, every time the legislature changes something, I now have to catch up and change my regulation. Because now you would have a state standard adopted, and I would have a community regulation that would need to be changed. We've had a cistern developed as recently as December in this town. And so I would like to know, what is the issue we are trying to solve? And I heard that developers can get online and they can see what happens, but we could add something that say it has to be designed, installed in accordance with the latest regulations adopted by the state, and that would be all we would need to add to this.
So in answer to your question, the triggering mechanism somewhere along the line disappeared. We used to have a triggering mechanism that would tell you when a developer or a development would have to put a cistern in. It disappeared.
So is the 3-lot thing that came up, that we were going back and forth about a cistern requirement or not for, sort of what brought this to everybody's attention?
Correct. And the three lots, what we've been functioning under since 2003.
Informally, because 3 lots is not in here.
It was at some point in time in writing. No one's been able to find it.
Okay. All right, that,
And further, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and then the way we've written this up, it's clear for our requirements or what we feel is best for the town, you know, versus the overall state code itself. You know, for some of the specifics in here, you know, for example, under the cistern specifications, you know, then it's clear to the developer that this is what we're looking for. It doesn't mean that we can't work with him and make modifications as we have, but when a developer sees this, they're clear on what our vision of what that cistern should look like, where it should be, and what should be on it, you know, including the vehicle pad and all that. So that's why we'd like to get that to replace the other regulations.
Karen?
Just to follow up with what Barbara was asking, but what portions of the cistern standards were copied directly from code regulations, if you know?
From the old cistern standards, you mean?
From the
no,
code.
the proposed fire cistern standards, what portions were copied from the code? I
Okay.
sort of have a couple of things marked, but it would be helpful if I knew my marks were right.
The cistern standard we've presented is a combination of items, but yeah, the triggering, the general information is from 1142. It talks about having to have the pull-offs and the protection and that sort of thing. The specifics of how this is laid out is not directly from the code. It's based on what the manufacturers can do for cisterns and what we need to get our trucks next to the cistern
there's a
May I,
opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't?
You're only interrupting your own guy, not me.
No, he's the boss. He's the boss.
No, I just want to bring clarity to NFPA 1142, and basically it says, this standard identifies a method of determining the minimum requirements for alternative water supplies for structural firefighting purposes in areas where the authority having jurisdiction determines that adequate and reliable water supply systems for firefighting purposes do not otherwise exist. So the standard itself is broader in nature, and then we bring it down to what really applies or would apply here in Goffstown.
Other board members? Collis?
So if I can echo, I think Barbara's point. First of all, I want to identify the problem. And it sounds to me like the problem is it's not clear what we require for cisterns. Clear and concise, right?
Right.
So that's the problem we're trying to solve, right? And you guys are the experts. You guys know what's required. I don't care where you go to, what technical stuff you do, but you know, I'm going to look to you guys to tell us what is appropriate for our community. And then it seems to me it's a pretty simple matter of taking that and crafting regulations that is clear and concise as to what's required.
Jim?
There's really two questions. What's required when we require it? And second, which is really the first issue, is when do we require it? And that's where we're seeing some variation among communities. And
Some confusion.
these gentlemen explained that's partially a function of equipment, which is the answer, but that's where we've gotten the most pushback from developers is, why am I being forced to build this for some community improvement, basically? We don't have a clear requirement anymore. It's been a...
So, Barbara, can I go ahead of you? So you're next. I saw your hand up. I'd like to go back to what you said, Chief Enos. We have in the past...
Deputy Chief,
Close
he's the
enough.
boss.
In the past, I thought we had a clear option in our regulations that a developer could put residential sprinklers in versus the cost of us.
That's correct.
To a point,
It-
if I may. Jim.
You know, this is where the gray area is coming in. I want this to be very concise when we get done with our cistern regulations. Because we had a recent applicant who stated to this board that he was denied residential sprinklers and told to put it in. And I was under the long-term belief at this board that they had an option.
The option is only available if there's water supply in the immediate area.
Well, you know, I think we need to get this much more nailed down. I think it shouldn't be a decision of the chief to make that discretionary decision. I think that they should either be allowed to have residential sprinklers to meet the requirement, or they should be required to put or they have the option to put in a cistern. I don't think we should say that one developer on this side of town had the option when another developer a little farther away was told you can't have it. We can't have it both ways, in my opinion. So I think that needs to be worked out before any of these sprinkler cistern, or any of these cistern standards get put to paper, in my opinion. Barbara?
Well, this sort of comes back to what I was saying. We have driveway standards, we have, standards for construction. And when we approve a plan, we have all that detail in the plan. So, because I can remember some of these projects when we were having, easement issues and culverts and, it was a lot of discussion when we approved the plans and the sheets were there to show what is happening. So are we approving are we going forward with a fairly big engineering issue that isn't going to be on our plan,
No,
other than the location?
in my opinion, and I could be wrong, they will be on the plan, but the fire department will give a recommendation as to the location and the number within the subdivision.
But they have to be on the plan.
Of course, they would give this advice prior to the plan coming before you.
And
And
we
they-
would have to then take whatever that advice is and deny a plan or have a waiver requested if for some reason we thought it wasn't appropriate for the plan. How would that work?
A waiver as far as, what do you mean, doing sprinklers instead?
Well, if we adopt this proposal as and there are changes, but I get that there are things that you're talking about changing. If we adopt this much more specific regulation than what we have, there's not a lot of discretion in this.
No, this document leaves or not gives the power, but he's saying he already has the power to make a determination of the number of cisterns and the location. So when we meet with a developer, Lieutenant Connor is always included, and he would relay, okay, here's where you need to put the cisterns, and this is the location. I mean, this is the number and this is the location. That plan would then come before you for review and approval, and if you had an issue about either the number or the location, I think we'd then have to bring the fire department back into the discussion.
Well, I guess my question is, if the engineering pieces have to be approved by DPW when we have engineering issues, why wouldn't this all have to be done before we approve the plan?
It does. Everything has to be done before you approve the plan. In fact, the engineering department would also be reviewing the location because they have to do the drainage studies and all of that. So that ties in together with what engineering is looking at. So that's part of the overall review by staff. And so when the plan comes to you, it would be complete with all of that information.
And along with the 10-foot easement access that is described in this document would have to all be worked out too.
Correct, and they would have to provide the easement documents, which is, the way it's done now.
Right,
That's
okay.
exactly what we do.
Karen?
Would it make sense to do what we did with the solar panel standards or regulations that we just did and have like a little subcommittee meet together to kind of finesse this?
I think that's a lot of extra work for us.
I think it is too,
I
but
think we should let the fire department make their recommendations, and we can either say, yes, we like them, or no, we don't like them. It's a simple yes or no. But I really would like that question answered about the options prior to this document being sent to us.
I disagree with your position on that. I just want you to
Thank
know,
you.
you're speaking for individually, not for the board when you said that. I don't have a problem with a determination that sprinklers in some sites would not be appropriate, and I've seen that in other towns. So,
But we have given developers that option for years in this town.
And if I could just...
Right or wrong, we've given them the option.
If I could just say one more thing about the sprinkler systems. The law changed however many years ago, 10 maybe.
yeah, we can't require them.
And the town can no longer require sprinklers in place of a cistern, but if the developer
Well, I'd like to-
offers to do that, then they can certainly agree to that.
I'd like to see, I don't know anything about that law change, so
I
I'd
know a
like to see
lot
that.
about it.
So,
I can get that for you, Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
for the board.
So I suggest at this point that the cleaned up revised document that you spoke about be sent to the planning director, who will send it back to us for a second look at it. If you choose to come in and be with us, we'd like to have you. Otherwise, it could be a meeting without the fire department.
We'd be happy to come back in.
Are there changes to be made?
Yeah, there's wording changes in there.
I took all those changes and put it in a document for us, and so we had it to reference, and if you had any other questions, then I would type that up and give it to the chief.
This document does or does not have the changes?
No, it does not.
That's the first
Okay.
draft.
That's the
then-
one
Okay,
where you
got it.
guys pointed out the
Yeah,
issues, so
okay.
I just have it for me to make notes to hand to the chief.
The letter
I'm
from the
just
chief
describing.
explains of what they're agreeing to change,
okay. I
and then,
wasn't sure
but they
if you
haven't
were-
made the changes yet.
Mr. Chairman, a slight variation on all what we
Go
were
ahead.
discussing. If the developer wants to exercise the option of a sprinkler house, the code specifies how the sprinkler heads are arranged, the diameter of the feed from the main,
Yep.
specifies the pressure of the main. Okay.
It's NFPA standard 13D or R?
No,
I
for
just-
residential.
I don't care. It's in there, okay.
Karen, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, perhaps when you come back, we could just delineate what language is directly from this regulation code, and what language is language that you all created. That way we can just
The only way you can do-
analyze it.
The only way you do that is have a black lines for the copy and paste and a red lines for what you've added, and that way we could differentiate within the document.
Yeah, you can do it a couple different ways. I have one.
Barbara?
It's been a while since I've been on the board, maybe Collis can answer, but I won't put him on the spot. What is the equipment you have as far as water truck, pumper trucks, hoses? What is it that we have now?
So what we base it off of right now is, we have 2 primary fire attack trucks. I'm sorry, we have 4 technically, pumpers that you hear the public refer to, engine pumpers. Those carry 1,000 gallons of water, and then our fire trucks carry 1,000 feet of large hose that's called feeder line, and that feeder line is what goes, between hydrants and stuff like that. That is, as the chief and Lieutenant Connor explained, there's some departments that have a real truck where you could carry a lot more. We have another truck that's a engine/tanker that carries 2,000 gallons of water. And that is our tanker truck. It has the ability to operate like an engine, so it can carry the other equipment as a regular engine. Then we have a tower ladder. That's the ladder truck with the bucket on it. That only carries 300 gallons of water. It does have a pump on it, and it does have some hose, so it can be used as a primary attack truck, but it has to be supplemented. And then we have a forestry truck as well.
But no tankers.
We have that engine tanker.
Okay, you have a tanker.
It's called an engine tanker.
The 2,000
With a 2,000 gallon.
With 2,000 gallons. So if there's a fire in one of the non-hydrant areas, that is sent along with the others. So we're basically going with about 4,000 gallons, plus what we call in for mutual aid too. We'll call in other tankers too, so.
Other board members? Finally, Bill, under this, you talked about the warranty, the manufacturer's warranty being transferred. I would suggest that you look into the state of New Hampshire's requirements for tradesmen. I believe there's a 1-year warranty on work from most tradesmen in the state of New Hampshire. So you would have a 1-year warranty from the time it's put into service by the installer. So that you look at that for yourself.
Where Bill was going with that is, let's say for instance, because this is how technology changes, if they came and proposed a poly type tank that was approved at Factory Mutual and said that could be used, then a poly tank might come with a 25-year warranty. We just want to make sure that if there is some type of warranty that they're providing, why shouldn't, we should hold that, not, it shouldn't be in limbo. And we definitely want to be,
But in terms of the installation.
Yes, you are correct, sir, because Bill
Leaky
has,
fitting, the pipes, the tanks aren't sealed properly, any number of things.
Workmanship.
It's a workmanship clause. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one final thing. If any planning board member would like to go see a cistern, if you haven't seen one yet, I'd be glad to take you out to give you, that perspective of it too, of, how they are set up in the different developments.
We thank you for the invitation, Chief. Anything else from this board? So we'll be looking for the amended document to look at again.
Very
At
good.
another meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next application is an old business item, map, not NAP, that's me later. Map 33, lot 17 and 18. Joanne, could you run it, please?
Yes.
Can we invite the applicants up to the table if they'd like to come up?
So, we have with us tonight, the owner is Joe Boschman, and with us from Keach Nordstrom is Mike Dahlberg. And, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You were there for so long. And so, you remember back in October, they came before you for a lot line adjustment and a subdivision for lots on New Boston Road. And one of the conditions, number 9, had a clause for lot, it was one specific lot, 3317-1, that it was restricted to a single-family home only. And they are here tonight to ask that that condition be removed from the site plan, the subdivision that was approved, as well as a waiver that they are requesting from the development regulations, and that would be from Appendix A, roadway standards, Section 8, driveways 11B. The issue at hand is probably the main issue here is that in our development regulations, under Appendix A, it states that if a driveway is serving 2 or 3 dwelling units, then the driveway shall be constructed to all the same standards as a driveway that is over 300 feet in length. The standards for a driveway over 300 feet are listed under Appendix A. And basically, they have to conform to the Nfpa fire standards. Mr. Boschman is planning to, or I shouldn't say planning to, I should say possibly looking to build a duplex on the lot that has the restrictions, so as well as the other lots within that subdivision. If that were the case, the way this development regulations currently read, he would need to provide a turnaround for all of the three driveways.
Yeah.
They're fairly long, they're not over 300 feet, they're 230 approximately, but they would require that as part of the change from a single family to a duplex. So I'll let them take over, but that's basically why they're here tonight.
So just to be clear, the request for the waiver is for all 3 lots in this subdivision, not just the one that has the...
The waiver is for all 3 lots. The removal of condition 9 was just for the 1 lot, so the other 2 lots are not restricted.
Board members, questions for staff?
The plan or the application is ready to be heard. It is complete, and there is no, well, staff believes there's no regional impact.
So this is it's under old business, but it's a new application?
It is a revised application.
So do we have to go through the acceptance and...
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion on that matter?
I'll make a motion that we find the application is complete, ready to be heard, and does not have regional impact.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Passes. Yeah, could you amend your motion that we would grant the waiver for discussion purposes only?
Yes.
We need to...
I'll second that again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne, we have some information from the fire department. You want to discuss that at a later time after the applicant has made their presentation?
Yes.
So what you're passing out that's highlighted is what we see forget it. So Joanne, what you just passed out, did everybody tell us what we just passed out?
This is from the applicant, this is not from me.
The development standards that's highlighted is from the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so if there's no more input from board members or questions for staff, I'll ask you guys to begin.
Me to start?
Sure.
Okay. So,
Please identify yourself for the records as usual.
Joe Boschman of Falcon Heights Properties. Mike has some different stuff to go at, but I'm here mostly just to go at the turnaround. It was brought to my attention that a driveway serving a duplex or a two-family would have to have a 90 by 45 turnaround on the lot, regardless of the driveway length. And for me, it's always been very clear, it's 300 feet is the threshold. And there is this document that says 2 or 3 dwellings. And my belief is that the 2 or 3 dwellings is actually referring to how many dwellings you can have on a shared/private road. Like Quail Run off Autumn, you can have up to 3 homes on a shared driveway, which would require the 90 by 45 hammerhead turnaround. But I don't believe that it's accurate that the board would want every two-family to have a 90 by 45 foot turnaround located on its individual lot. So I provided the shared driveway, no more than 3 single-family residential dwellings shall be on a shared driveway. I think that's where the confusion comes in. And then I also provided the B and C for your information, and then I provided a copy of Quail Run, which shows the 3 houses on the private road/common driveway with the hammerhead turnaround that would be required regardless of length. And then I also provided the one off Addison Road called Old Victorian Way. Doesn't show a hammerhead, but it shows the cul-de-sac with the 3 lots. My other reason for believing that is if it was a 3-family, you'd need a site plan. It wouldn't fall under this driveway thing. And it also doesn't say like anything greater than 3. It just says 2 or 3, which to me is speaking to the common driveway with the up to 3 houses on a shared common private road.
So I'm going to interrupt you, Joe. Joanne, you stated to us, you talked about duplex houses. And what regulation is that in our standards?
It's a two-family. Single family and then two-family. That two-family would be the duplex.
Right. So where is it in our regulations that states that if you want to build a duplex, you got to have a driveway that meets that standard?
So it's in our development regs, let me just get that number again. It's under Appendix A, Section 811B.
It says, can I read it for you, Mr. Chairman?
1 minute, Joe. Yep. So how does a waiver for this appendix road standard, Section 8 driveways 11B, how is that the same as what you present, different from what you presented?
Because the 2 or 3 dwelling units, it's not in the NFPA. It's only here, and my belief is that the only reason why it says driveways, private roads serving 2 or 3 dwelling units, if it was 3 dwelling units, I'd come with a site plan.
They say single-family residential buildings. Those are not, they don't say anything about a duplex or...
This says driveways/private roads serving 2 or 3 dwellings. If that were to say 2 or 3 homes, we wouldn't have this issue tonight. But they're using the wording
Tim,
2 or 3 dwelling units as meaning a 2-family.
Let me ask you a question, Tim.
Go ahead, Tim.
This is not an open space development, right? You know that page 62 comes from Appendix E for open space development. So how does that apply to your development?
I apologize. It's not that it applies, but just follow me on the logic of it.
Okay.
Driveways/private roads, which the only private road I'm really aware of would be like a common open space driveway, and that would be a common private road. It says driveways/private roads serving 2 or 3 dwelling units, no matter their length, shall be the same for the driveways serving over 300. So if it was a 3 dwelling units, it would have to come for a site plan. It wouldn't be under the driveway development regs. it would be a site plan with handicap parking, snow storage, and dumpsters. So 2 or 3 dwelling units doesn't make any sense, and then what, if I have 4, I don't have to meet it? It just goes away? So the 2 or 3 dwelling units, I think, is referencing the open space private driveway with up to 3 homes on a common driveway, because it doesn't make any sense any other way.
Can I give a little history on just
Please,
what I
Joanne.
found researching this? So this section that we're just talking about right now was inserted into the development regulations in 2006. And
When you say this section,
that
page
section
49.
about the 2 or 3 dwelling units.
Okay.
The Appendix A,
Appendix A,
Section
okay.
811B, was inserted into the development regs in 2006. There was discussion, they had 1 or 2 workshop meetings, the planning board. I was actually the chair. There was discussion about the fact that they wanted to add, or this was coming from Steve Griffin at the time, he wanted to add another restriction that said anything over 150 feet needed to have a turnaround for the fire truck. And you were one of the people that thought that was too restrictive. And so the board decided, no, we're not going to go forward with that. But there was nothing in the minutes that said anything about adding this language. I couldn't find it, I read the hearing minutes and all. I went through the files and I couldn't find any discussion whatsoever about how it turned into this language versus what they were talking about originally, which was the 150 feet. Since then, like normally, if someone were to build and they were less than the I'm sorry, not less than 300, but if they were building a duplex, they would need to come here for a waiver if they had a shorter driveway, which has never happened since 2006, since this was on the books. So I don't really know why this is there and why it's worded that way. I tried to find out and I couldn't find any clarification on it. Currently, if someone comes in for a driveway permit and they're close to the road and there's no issues, the fire department has no problem in getting the truck right up to the house, the driveway permit gets issued. So there was nothing I could give as concrete information as to why it's there or why it's worded that way. And I was hoping I could find something, but there was nothing.
Can I ask a question? So if they weren't requesting to have the condition removed to have the 2-family house built, would we need to be having this discussion?
No.
Okay.
But he's also looking to do it on the other lots, which were part of this subdivision. He would like to do duplexes on those other 2 lots.
And then we would have to have that
Correct,
discussion on
yeah.
that particular
Mhm.
lot, okay.
Well, I'd like to make sure we know which item what are we talking about right now? Are we talking about the request to have it changed back, or are we talking about the waiver
The
request?
turnaround, the waiver
Well,
request.
there's 2 items.
That's what I said.
This started with the motion you made with the condition of approval that said that lot 17-1 was restricted to a single-family home, because the language that Lieutenant Connor had included in his report wasn't clear on what he meant on that if there was going to be a duplex or more units, it might require a wider driveway.
I'm confused, Mike. I don't remember having this discussion at the meeting. David brought up the idea of we were going to have, was this going to be a single house or a duplex, if I'm not mistaken?
I think
Did
I
you-
might have raised it.
Or maybe Karen brought it up.
Well,
Someone-
Karen brought it up.
Yeah, I did.
But I don't remember having any information from Bill Connor about
No,
whether...
she referenced Bill's comments
In the
that
staff
a
report.
duplex or a 3-unit would require a wider driveway.
I did. No, I
So
didn't.
My memory's failing.
I
don't remember.
contacted Lieutenant Connor and said, what is the driveway width we would need for a duplex on this lot? He told me.
The reason, one of the reasons for the restriction was that if we had to go wider and increase our impact into the outer 50-foot buffer. So once I got the information from Lieutenant Connor, what the driveway width would be, I had allowed for a 12-foot driveway and 4-foot shoulders in
The original application.
in the original application of the sign. So all we need is a 16-foot surface, it's 12 2-foot shoulders. We fit within that corridor. We don't need any more impact into the buffer. Once I had that information, I contacted Joanne. I said, Joanne, what do we need to do to get that restriction removed? If we can get that restriction removed before we record the Mylar, it just makes things cleaner. She said, give us the form, pay for a butter notification, and write us a letter. So you have the letter, our reasoning of why we want to have that restriction removed. Fast forward that letter and the application back in December. Joanne was doing her due diligence and talked to Eric, and then the section that says that driveways serving 2 or 3 dwelling units, which we have always interpreted that to mean structures, not a duplex, because I've been in town for doing this for 30 years, and the whole genesis of this was when the planning board in town started to allow there to be up to 3 structures, 3 houses on a common driveway. That's the threshold was 300 feet to have a turnaround. It never applied to duplexes with driveways under 300 feet. And I have an email from Lieutenant Connor this afternoon. That says, yeah, no, we didn't require turnarounds for driveways to duplexes. They're all over town. I said, okay. So then Joanne said, well, if you want to do duplexes on the other lots, you should file for a waiver.
Because same issue for all 3.
Same issue for all 3.
Once that was brought to our attention that they wanted to try to do 11B, then we knew we had the same issue because it's basically a 4,000 square foot turnaround that nobody can park in for a duplex.
But at Joanne's request, she informed us that the language is not clear. She couldn't find the genesis of it, what it meant, what the intent was, but it's there. And I try to fill in the blanks with my knowledge of being in town, working, doing this for 30 years, was that the genesis was when there was a development that was going to have a private driveway, i.e. private roadway, for 3 units, you had to have a turnaround at the end. And the threshold was anything over 300 feet for a private residence was the threshold to have a turnaround. We're not arguing whether or not turnarounds for driveways over 300 feet should exist. Right? We're not arguing that point. That's fine. What we're arguing is the interpretation that every single driveway that services a duplex has to have a turnaround.
Regardless of length of driveway.
Regardless of length of driveway. And we know for a fact that that's not true.
So, Jim, you're busy looking in your book. Do you have something to report?
I don't think it's today an issue. It's the definition of dwelling units in our zoning ordinance, and that's incorporated into our subdivision regs. It includes a dwelling or portion thereof designed by use by one family. So I disagree that it applies to the structure. It's dwelling unit in our zoning.
Which could even be construed as being ADUs.
It could, yeah.
So, Joanne, in your determination, does the word duplex appear in the text for where you've drawn the information from that they need an Nfpa suitable turnaround in the driveway? Is the word duplex in that language?
No.
Okay.
I think That's a newer word that people use nowadays versus they used to say two-family. Now
What
it's
are you
called
referencing?
duplex.
Were you referencing two residences? Is that what you were referencing?
Duplex meaning two units that are attached, like apartment units.
Is that stated clearly in that text that it's, no, it's an
It just
interpretation?
says two, it says two or three dwelling units.
And under our ordinance, that's pretty clear, that includes a duplex.
I think it's
Because the way a
just,
dwelling unit is defined. And the question is that an appropriate standard, or should we waive it?
100% agree. That's exactly the,
Karen?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to see the forest for the trees here. Just taking a step back. So the fire is okay with the size of the driveways to have a duplex built there? I just want to make sure that's accurate.
my opinion would be the width, but I think if you ask the fire department, they would always say.
They're shaking their head back there,
Yep.
so.
There is a
On the
lengthy-
On the width, which was originally provided on the plan, I believe, yes. But their opinion is that if they could get a turnaround, even though it doesn't say in Nfpa that it's required for a duplex less than 300 feet, I think they would like one.
No, and I get that point. I'm
Yeah.
just talking about the width of the
The
driveway.
width, I believe we are all set on.
Yes, we are.
There's a lengthy letter in
Yeah,
the
I couldn't-
staff report that
Okay, in the
is
staff report,
from
okay.
the fire department, and
I was looking for that earlier.
there is a
Could you-
conclusion at the
Can you
end.
summarize that for us, Joanne? What's the conclusion?
Well, I'll just give you the conclusion. The important points to consider for this site are: the more stringent code or requirement prevails when codes or municipal requirements conflict. In this case, if the town's development regulations provide more stringent requirements than the code, the development regulations prevail. It is in the interest of public safety on long driveways that emergency vehicles are provided with a turnaround so they may drive out rather than execute hazardous and time-consuming backing maneuvers.
So, to my opinion, based on the letter and based on what I know, that right now, that appendix or the letter B, where it says you would have to have a 90 by 45 turnaround, that's more stringent than any other code, which you have the right to do. Your development regs could be more stringent than any code, but right now it's more stringent than any code.
Other board members? And Gail is voting now that Barbara has left the meeting.
So to take that logically forward, some people may say illogically, but you have a lot in the Village Commercial District, 5,000 square feet, 50 by 100, right? The driveways can't be closer than 10 feet to the property line, right?
Is that the code in the Village Commercial District, or is that the code in the Res R1?
No, I'm,
That's the
I'm
village.
asking because I don't know that people can
Oh,
meet
in the
those
village, you don't have to
regulations
even be 10
in the
feet from
commercial
the side.
district, in the Village Commercial
No.
District.
all right, so if you have a 50 by 100 foot lot, 5,000 square feet, and you can put a duplex in the Village Commercial District, we have to have a 45 by 90 foot turnaround.
That's where a waiver request would be probably considered, and
Well,
because of the fact that you can't put a 45-foot fire truck in a 25-foot driveway.
my point exactly is that there are duplexes in downtown that were just built, and there are duplexes all over town that have been built.
Well, Mike, I
Well, hold on, we're
understand your
being held to,
position.
we're now being held to a different standard than everybody else has been in the past 17 or 18 years. It's not fair.
You're not being held to any standard right now. We're having discussion about standards.
Well, I see it going in a certain direction, and I don't think it's fair. And I was informed
And
by...
just for your
I was-
consideration, the Village Commercial District, the one across from TD Bank, we didn't see that. That went straight through the building department because it was a permitted structure in that area, so
But
don't kick that back at us as if
No,
we
but no, no.
look the other
I'm-
way.
No, I'm saying that the development regulations say that any new or improved or relocated driveway
Yep.
has to fall under this ordinance,
Yep.
this regulation, and it didn't.
Yeah,
And
then
if we go to build a duplex in the Village Commercial, I was informed by staff that every single duplex lot in town has to have a turnaround.
Well, then you ask for a waiver if the driveways are too short for a duplex turnaround.
Well, that's what they're doing.
You're asking for a waiver for how long are the driveways on these 3 lots, approximately? Give or take 25 feet. Are they 75-foot driveways?
I would say they range 200.
Yeah. So they're
200 at the most for the two on the right, the lot 17-1, which is the lot that started all this, it's like 275 feet.
right. So these lots would be discussed for application of possible regulations. A village commercial district lot that's where you're going to have stubby driveways, certainly it wouldn't be prudent to require you to put that.
Understood, but the literal application, of what I was told, why I had to come here for the waivers, was that all lots that have a duplex have to have a turnaround,
Well,
regardless of location.
Well, that's,
Excuse me.
Doesn't make any sense.
I just would like to just bring it back to where it says 2 or 3 dwellings, the definition of dwellings. And again, if it was 3 dwellings, it wouldn't be under the driveway regs, it would be a site plan. So I seriously just think that there is an error in it. I think over 300 feet, single or duplex, you need a 90 by 45 turnaround. Less than 300, single or duplex, I don't believe you do. And there's nothing, I read both sections of Nfpa today, section 1 and section 1141. I believe it's 1141, don't hold me to that. And, you know, it didn't specifically say anything about a duplex under 300 feet needing it. And I think all Mike's trying to say is a 90 by 45 turnaround that technically you can't park in. So we can't just butt it up against the garage door and say, well, there's your turnaround, because technically this right here, the development reg says you can't park in it. So I need a 90 by 45 turnaround or structure or whatever that then I need additional driveway for people to park. And on a duplex less than 300 feet long, I just figured bringing it to the board to say, I think there's a mistake here. In my case, I need a waiver, but the next time you do the development regs, I think you might say, let's work on the definition of dwelling, single-family home. Let's get that thing nailed down.
Karen,
So how many turnarounds would you be required to build under this?
one for each driveway.
One for each driveway?
Each lot would have a 90 by 45 turnaround
two.
that couldn't be used for parking.
So
3.
two. 3, okay.
Well, there'd be
There's
three.
two
three
presently
lots.
could be, he's asking for the restriction on the third to be lifted
Gotcha.
to make it a possibility,
Okay.
which is a separate request.
Gotcha.
So what's the board's take on this interpretation of the regulations that require a turnaround on a driveway where the possibility there would be 2 residences?
Less than 300 feet.
I don't want to put the footage in there, Joe. We're
Oh.
talking about how it reads. It talks about number of residences.
Just to
As
be clear,
opposed-
if it breaks
Dwelling
300 feet, it gets a turnaround, whether it's a single family or a 2-family or whatever else it is, it gets it.
We know that, because that's the
Okay.
NFPA standard.
Yep, that's correct.
And then the reg said dwelling units, correct?
It said 2 or 3 dwelling
It's on
units.
page
and I'm
49,
trying.
you should all the books, look at it.
Don't scold me.
Oh, no, it's right there. Here, I'll show you. It's right here.
Thank you.
On page 49 you're showing her?
Yeah.
Definition of dwelling unit? Is that right?
It's in the zoning ordinance, not the development.
And you've read that, Mike, you've seen that regulation on page 49 in the development regulations? B, driveway, private road serving 2 or 3 dwelling units, not residences. Dwelling units imply either apartment buildings or a 2-family house.
And
That's the
again,
implication.
my cue was private road. I was like, when are we calling a driveway a private road? And then a 3-family would come under site plan, not under driveway anyways.
I'm going based on my experience in town. It was never interpreted that way before.
Well, Mike, if we made mistakes in the past, or not us, other boards have made mistakes in the past, we're not obligated to make the same mistake again.
I don't think it's a mistake, I just think it's poorly worded. And no one ever had that interpretation before. I think precedent dictates what everyone thought it was.
Have you heard?
Please, Jim.
Well, I'm not scolding anybody
Speak
on
right
the
up.
board.
Yes, don't scold us.
No. Second, I just agree with Mike on precedent. We're not compelled to repeat our mistakes. the issue here is there is a regulation. It's there, we can't disregard it, but we do have the authority, given certain findings, to waive it. So is it appropriate to waive? And I could see situations where we would waive it on a stub, and we might consider it on a longer driveway. So is this within the short driveway or the long driveway consideration? The NFP.
Well, that almost-
300 is an absolute standard, but we have judgment on other design standards. It's the whole point of regulations in a board. If it were entirely mathematical, we wouldn't have to be here, and I could be home right now. So I think it's appropriate to consider it as a waiver request, but not to disregard it because I don't think it should be there.
Right.
I agree. That's why we have provisions for waiver requests for
Correct.
unique situations such as this.
That's right.
So presently, we are talking about 2 lots in this project that do not have a restriction on them. The third lot has a restriction. So at this, before any thing can be talked about the third lot, we have to decide on the first 2 lots here, on whether we're going to apply this
Well, do we or
section
don't we?
8B. What? The third lot is presently limited to a single
Right, right,
family.
right.
Jim?
I think it would be useful to, since they've submitted a report, to consider the fire department comments when we weigh the appropriateness of the waiver request. And whether Lieutenant Connor wishes to be heard. I want to give him the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I would second that.
I would just say briefly before I step down and let the fire department come up, I would find it unusual from a historic standpoint, not unreasonable that you'd want to do it, but when NFPA doesn't have something for something less than 300 feet, and the Lieutenant Connor has to say that your requirement is more stringent than NFPA, that to me is like a red flag. It just doesn't always go that way. And the 3 dwelling units would be a site plan anyways, it wouldn't be on a driveway. And an ADU could be considered a dwelling unit per the pure definition, which would mean everybody that gets a ADU would either need a waiver or they would need a 90 by 45 turnaround. And to be fair, my 4th waiver was this, when the DPW told me that they were using their own discretion. Well, that's 150 feet, it's 80 feet. And I was like, it's in the development regs. It's got to be either a waiver or it doesn't happen. It's got to be 90 by 45 turnaround. So.
So where are we right now? Is Bill Connor your witness here tonight?
I don't think so.
I didn't even know Bill was ready to step up and speak.
No, we're gonna let Bill speak for himself.
Please.
Lieutenant Connor, do you wish to be recognized to speak?
I can answer your question, sir.
Come on up and sit down and state your name for the record for the 2nd time tonight.
Lieutenant Bill Connor, Fire Prevention Officer for the town of Goffstown. So, reference was made to the email this afternoon about duplex driveways, and to be clear, the email made reference to very short driveways, which we really don't pay much attention to because we fight fires from the street on those cases. We're parking in front. There's no need to turn around, we're on a public way. So those duplexes basically become a non-issue as far as the department's concerned. The earlier letter we talked about where I defer to the town ordinance, that's standard practice in code enforcement. We defer to the more stringent code. So, and this happens all the time between the building department and I. Occasionally the building code is more stringent than the fire code and vice versa. We go with whichever is the more stringent, more heavily required code. So in this case, your driveway standard for 2 and 3 family or 2 and 3 dwelling units is what would take precedence over my NFPA codes.
One very good witness for you, Joe. Jim?
Well, may I ask Lieutenant Connor if he has a recommendation on whether a waiver should be granted in this case?
The code I enforce basically is that 300 foot that Joe was making reference to. Anytime you're backing up a piece of apparatus the size of our fire trucks, it's very dangerous, and we try to avoid it as much as possible. If we're backing up over 100 feet, there's a lot of opportunity to go off the road, run things over, hit things, people get hurt. So we like to avoid that as much as possible.
Karen?
Is there some sort of middle ground in terms of where the driveways are located and how many turnarounds could potentially be utilized for that particular area?
So NFPA takes things one unit at a time. So unless this was an apartment complex, we don't look at all the driveways together.
I think we actually had a subdivision out off Checkerberry proposal where the two turning areas were going to butt into each other and create almost a through pass. I think I remember that project years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
The last, just for the record, the last duplex that we had that had a turnaround, the driveway was somewhere in the vicinity of 200 feet in length, and it was on New Boston Road. So duplex, and I'm going to guess that was probably 8 or 10 years ago.
Where does Joe get the 45 by 90 number? Did you give him that number for a turning apparatus turning area?
That's probably from the driveway standards. Eric has detailed turnaround standards for the traffic circle and hammerheads.
Okay. Dave has his hand up at the end.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
So you're just waving? Anybody else?
I just have a question for
Go ahead, please.
for the applicant.
Please. Well, we'll get the applicant back
That's
up
a-
there.
that's a comment.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Come on back up, guys.
Is it possible to build these turnarounds?
Anything's possible. It just pushes everything back further, creates obviously more impervious area, and technically nobody's supposed to park there, so now I'm making 4,000 square foot of parking turnaround, and then I need additional parking for their living and guests. Yeah.
Well, certainly, Joe, the first lot where the 60 by 70 building area is close to the road, that might be an applicant waiver, because they wouldn't have to drive in the driveway to even get to that building envelope area, right?
I'm sorry.
You concur with that, Mike? You do not concur with
Well,
that?
we showed a building pocket just to prove to the planning board that it meets your requirements. The house could be built anywhere.
Right.
Yes, but you showed where your 4K septic area is with a test pit. Would you propose to move that as well?
Yeah, if we had to.
If you felt it was necessary to move things around?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really, just to be fair, less for me, a question of can we make it fit versus we're gonna put a 90 by 45 turnaround on every two-family. It's,
No, we probably wouldn't do that, Joe.
well, I'm just saying that that's what the development regulations say.
I understand what they say.
Yeah. So to us, 300 feet has always been the
Yes.
magic
That's
number.
memorized.
And to
Yeah.
us, it's still
Right
the
there.
number that if you go past 300, you went past, and if you're short of 300, you're short of 300.
Does any board member feel that this is sufficiently unclear in our regulations that we don't have grounds to enforce
No.
B, 11B? Seems to be a no from all around. I heard some no's, but not all no's.
No, I think we view this as a waiver request. Again, we
Yep.
can't disregard what's in our board. We can amend them next time and get rid of stuff, unless it's clearly wrong. And I don't think we would say this is clearly wrong. It's not clearly a mistake. It's maybe unnecessary or more restrictive than people might think we need, but it's there.
Okay?
I would agree, that's why we have waiver provisions, situations like this.
So shall we, unless the applicant has more to add, should we conclude and call for a vote
Do we have to open?
for the waiver?
We can. Do we want to address the other issue 2 of the change in use?
Well, I think that's a moot point, because if we decide that waivers are going to be disallowed for the first 2 lots, certainly the waiver would be disallowed for the 3rd lot.
Well-
Even if it got changed back from a single to a duplex.
Typically, we rule on the whole application, not in pieces. So I would suggest they make the presentation on the other issue now, and then we can close the public comment on both and then deliberate,
Okay.
not segment.
So would you like to please present your case for the request to have the single-family restriction removed from the other lot? and
Yes, so-
why you think it works?
The letter I wrote back in December indicates my communications with Lieutenant Connor on the width of the driveway. And regardless of a turnaround, the restriction,
Requirement.
the condition of approval for a single family was predicated upon, we're not sure what the width had to be for a duplex lot. So we've proven that we can meet that requirement without going into any further into the granted waiver of the outer 50-foot buffer. So regardless of if you grant the waivers for the turnaround, I still believe that you can grant, reverse the condition of approval, because we can demonstrate that we have the width, and I've actually submitted plans on that. I think they're 2 separate items. You can approve the removal of the condition and not grant the waivers, if you feel so inclined.
Board members who discussed this at a prior meeting, do we have recollection of why we put that restriction on there? Any board member have that recollection?
I think it was because of the recommendation from fire that it would need to be, I agree that I'm not saying whether or not, I'm not going to speak for the lieutenant in terms of what he said or did not say, but I remember the write-up being that it was too narrow a driveway for a multifamily
Okay.
resident.
Okay, Jim?
Maybe my memory is not as clear as others, but we were concerned about the waiver of the outer 50 feet
That too, yeah.
in light particularly of the Conservation Commission's recommendation that we not grant it. And my recollection, again, which may not be correct, is that we were concerned about the intensity of use of this lot. There is a difference in intensity of use between a single family and a duplex. And in my mind, that would have been a material difference on whether we granted the waiver. I don't recall that it was just a driveway width issue, but
I'm sorry.
So that was my hesitancy to approve this change.
I concur, Jim, because I thought we discussed the amount of area that remained on the building area that was not included in the outer 50 feet, and it's a very small area around the house. It just fits right in there neatly, of the building area that's proposed on the site. So I think part of the discussion was about the increased use of the property with 2 families living there versus a single family. Mike, please.
The condition of approval for the restriction was only brought up after Karen read the comments from Lieutenant Connor about the driveway width.
Okay.
I'm absolutely clear on that, because in my letter, just a month later, to Lieutenant Connor, we talked about the width. In my communication with Joanne, it was always about the width and whether or not we had adequate width in that corridor and the outer 50-foot buffer that we got the waiver for, without having to come back to the planning board to increase that waiver. There was discussion on the intensity of use, but we said that we can live with that, within that buffer, and make it work. The situation, again, back to the condition of approval for single family, was based on the murkiness of Lieutenant Connor's comments on what the actual driveway width would have to be for a duplex, which is allowed by the ordinance.
You told us that.
Correct.
Which is within the area that was originally asked for,
Correct.
correct? So
Because we
the
just-
driveway width has not changed
I understand.
at all.
The corridor has not changed.
Mike explained the 16-foot.
Right, so,
Karen?
If I recall correctly, I don't think Collis was at the meeting.
I was not.
Yeah, but you were at the Conservation Committee meeting?
I can't say for sure. I mean, it either wasn't there or I have absolutely no recollection.
That's because you just had your foot surgery and you're
Oh,
on drugs
yeah.
anyway.
We do all remember that the Conservation Commission
Right.
voted to disallow this driveway.
Yeah.
And we actually gave the waiver against their recommendation.
I mean, I could tell you, it sounds like a recommendation that would come from the Conservation
Oh, I
Commission, but
remember.
I can't attest that. I don't,
Well, I
I have no
remember they-
recollection of
They
it.
recommended not having the waiver.
And we don't,
What was the date of the meeting?
yeah, I was gonna say, do we have the meeting?
I can look at the minutes.
When was it, Mike? What month?
It was October,
it
right?
was late October.
October
Oh, we
21st, maybe?
have the approval in the packet.
I think it said October 21st. No, sorry, October 14th.
I don't know, I'm so old, all the weeks and months are just running together.
I did not make a note about the Conservation Commission's decision.
I remember that in the minutes for both meetings.
I remember reading the report.
I remember it was a heated discussion.
So,
Passionate discussion.
Passion.
Yeah. Were you there? Yes, you were.
well, we gotta go somewhere with this, sitting here looking at each other.
Well, I thought Gail was looking at the minutes to see what she determined.
I think it's pretty clear what the Conservation Commission's position was.
Yeah, but that's, honestly, that's not even germane. The waiver was granted.
You know.
I'm not trying to be rude.
No, I'm trying to figure out what
No,
the clarity on the condition.
To the contrary, it's granted with a specific condition,
Yeah.
that it's a single-family home. Now you're asking for a change, and you're asking us to go back and revisit why we did that. And why it doesn't matter, we can consider it now.
But it
You're
wasn't,
No, because you're asking for an amendment to a previously approved. So we can decide on any basis whether to grant that amendment or not. And the fact that maybe it wasn't a reason at that time, it could be now. That's the nature of a request for an amendment. You're not otherwise entitled to. I'm prepared to make a motion when you finish.
We have to have a public hearing.
Okay, I was going to say when you have the public hearing.
You guys can stay right there for a minute. So, we seem to be at an impasse for discussion at this point, so I'm going to open the public hearing for this application at 8:51. If anybody wishes to speak, please come forward and be recognized and speak. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing.
The minutes reflect there was a prior meeting before the October 14th meeting.
I'm going to make a motion
Please make a motion.
that we deny the request for the amendment of the restriction on use on lot 33-17-1, but that we grant the request to waive the turnaround on the other lots on the reasoning that in light of the lot size, the extra turnaround space, and in light of the proximity to the brook and other areas, the impervious surface that would be created is excessive and will have an undue impact.
What was the last part of that, Jim?
It would have an excessive impact, yeah.
Is that you're making that motion?
I am.
I'll second the motion.
So the motion was to deny the request for the use restriction change on 3317-1 and to grant the waivers for the driveway requirements to have turnarounds on 3317 and 3318. Is that correct?
And how long are the driveways on?
We talked about that earlier, 200 and something
Well,
feet.
it hasn't been determined, but it could be up to.
Well, they gave us an approximation. Okay, so any discussion on the motion?
I mean, Gil, are you able to find anything about?
No,
Condition.
like I said, the minutes reflected a previous meeting, and I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
So if you want me to go, I can look.
I would like to know just for my own benefit.
I think the discussion, particularly on the impact, was following the receipt of the Conservation Commission report, which was at the last meeting.
Yeah, I remember that part. It's
Yeah,
just a
the
matter of
Conservation
finding it.
Commission report was at the second meeting.
The what?
The discussion of the Conservation Commission report was at the night we voted on it, the second meeting, if there was.
It's not in the minutes, so I would think it's probably in the first.
So it was prior to October 14th?
Oh, did we? I don't
The
remember.
motion's been made and seconded, I have not called for a vote yet.
So would that be immediately after, as in September 23rd? Let's find out.
You should look at the.
Yep, September 23rd, we heard that application. Concom against allowing driveway and outer 50-foot buffer. I wrote it down. That was on the 29, 23, or 21. I did write it down.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's here. Because Joanne mentioned it in her review of the application. Karen asked if there was a wetland scientist, and let's see, so. And
So
then
are you satisfied that it was discussed, or what's your
No,
question?
I'm trying to figure out the basis for the condition, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
All right.
Trying to refresh my recollection.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor by Jim, seconded by Collis for a vote on the matter. Any discussion on the motion? Keep discussing, get it out.
Yeah, I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. I know you want to leave, but.
Yeah, actually I do.
So what, I'm sorry, Jim, I just don't understand the basis for granting the waivers. You're saying it would just be an undue impact?
It's a lot of impervious surface on an area that's near a brook. And we're balancing fire protection, which is important, with protection of natural resources, which
Gotcha,
we
okay.
view also as important.
Now I understand.
And given that this ordinance begs for waivers as we grant either expressly or implicitly, it's a factor that we can consider that balancing of goals. And in this case, I think the balance weighs in favor of less impervious surface.
Gotcha, now I understand.
I think I said it better the second time around than the first.
How's your thoughts, Ben?
Good, I'm good.
We'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of Jim's motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mike is opposed, he raised his hand.
No, I was putting my glasses on.
Okay. So the motion passes. So your request to change the use restriction on 3317-1 is denied, and you have a waiver for turnarounds for duplexes on the other two lots. Okay? Thank you very much, guys.
Can I ask you a question?
We can tell the fire department they can go home.
Before we go any farther, Joanne, I'd like to have Eric come up and introduce the new town engineers, because he's been sitting there quiet all that evening for almost for nothing.
He hasn't run screaming from the room yet.
Didn't have anybody yelling and carrying on.
Sarah, leave or?
Meeting's not over yet.
Excuse me?
Did Sarah leave?
Sarah Wordy has been gone for months.
Well, I knew she was on maternity leave.
No, she's on permanent leave.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
She moved.
Sarah moved to Guilford.
She is now
She worked for
the
Belmont.
planning administrator in Belmont and stuff
Nobody
like that.
told me, or I wasn't paying attention, one or the other.
All right, Eric,
So-
do your thing.
All right, I've been filling in, helping out in the meantime, but I'd like to introduce Scott Ozana, PE.
Scott what?
Ozana, sorry. Ozana.
Can you spell it?
Ozana.
Just like it sounds.
Oh, Ozana. I heard Lozana.
Is it your ears or your thoughts?
Yeah, one or the other. And my eyes don't work very well either.
Well, welcome. If you're going to be attending meetings, you'll be asked to give your opinions on a lot of things, or if you're going to come together. I don't know if they want to pay for both of you to be here for comp time, but
No, we
one or the
don't.
other. We'll see.
I think he's gonna join me for the next one because there's some stuff that he's been working with the board on, and
Yep.
he'll help me through those, and then after that, he'll just have me, unless I really need his assistance.
In your
but-
prior occupations, have you been involved with planning boards?
I have not, no.
You'll find it
No.
extremely pleasurable.
Yeah, I'm coming from the private sector, so I have some experience with public meetings and such like that, but not planning boards, no.
It's a laugh a
Because
minute.
as a rule, the board is going to ask for your professional opinion,
Mhm.
and oftentimes we defer to the professional opinion of DPW staff when trying to make decisions on engineering matters before the board. Okay? Well, thanks for coming in for nothing tonight. We appreciate
No
meeting you.
problem.
You guys can get on out.
Kinds
Yeah,
of
did you a Goffstown
material.
resident or no?
I am a Goffstown resident.
All right.
That's good.
Good
That's
to
good to
hear.
know. Don't
Yeah.
give us your phone number.
Prank call you in the middle of the night.
All right.
Can we go home now?
Any other business for this board tonight?
Motion to
I have a
adjourn.
question, I have two things.
Go ahead.
First, I have a question that these guys were involved in a discussion that we were having. So currently, the driveway regulations are included in the development regulations. But you've always said that if someone were building a house, on a vacant lot somewhere,
Thank you.
that was not part of a new subdivision,
thank you.
that they would not fall under the development
We don't have
regulations.
jurisdiction.
So what I've seen, just looking at other regulations based on what is happening here tonight, I came across separate documents adopted by planning boards that are driveway regulations or driveway ordinance, whatever they're called, as a separate document. Would that be something you would be interested in as we change the?
I just question our authority to do that. Our authority is subdivisions and site plan.
There is authority from the state. I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but I sent everything to these guys today. It comes from an RSA, which covers driveways.
236
And the
something.
Commissioner of
17.
Transportation has given authority to the planning board.
Okay, man,
But
we're
if-
giving
we
our
can talk
ground.
about that later, but
We're
I
all
just
about
want to
the
see
power grab.
if it's something you even
Well,
want to
Jim
look
is.
into. Okay.
You don't know me very well.
And then I have one other quick thing. We have no business for the March 10th
The
meeting.
chairman is now, no, applications been, deadlines have been met?
Correct.
Well, that's
The
good.
meeting is
'cause-
officially canceled.
good, 'cause that's town meeting voting week, so unless it's here
Yes.
very late that night.
So you lucked out, Jim. All right, Phil,
Motion to adjourn.
got your name already. Who's going to second it? Call us out.
Yes, I will say.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion passes. We're done.
Here's the-
Thank you, GTV.